Yeah, I mean, I was born in Nigeria. I lived there till I was about 12 years old. And, Nigeria is a beautiful country. I really loved it there. It was just really sort of vibrant and so just incredibly wonderful, to be honest. I lived in Lagos for about 9 years before I actually came here. So yeah, it was peaceful. I had friends around me. I had family around me as well. So it was just really fun and free. I played games outside. I was always running around. I watched films, of course. Yeah, so it was a lovely upbringing, to be honest. And then one day my parents were like, all right, guys, we're going to come to England. And I was like, okay, I didn't really know about England. I sort of watched films, where we saw England, but, I didn't really know much about it. But it was strange because I was 12 years old. I was not quite a teenager yet. So it's a strange time to uproot one's life from a country that is always known to then a whole new space, a whole new sort of country. So for me, it was exciting and daunting. Because for me, I was so happy in Nigeria, and my life plan was always going to be there. I would sort of go to, I would live there, go to school there, maybe get married there. I don't know. I had all this plan for my life in a sense, and that all changed when my dad was like, yeah, we're moving to London. And yeah, it was weird. I said, okay, I didn't really know much about it. I was excited because change was exciting for me back then. I had two siblings. One was 10, one was 6. So, I was the firstborn. So I wanted to be excited, because if I was excited, they would be excited as well. So I was like, yeah, guys, we're going to London. Yeah, it's a great experience. And yeah, and then I came to London. I was 12 years old, and it was weird. It was incredibly odd, because we went from this incredibly hot country to this incredibly cold country. It was the cold slapped me in the face. It literally punched me in the face. I remember we landed, and I got out there, and I was just punched in the face. It was so cold. It was freezing. I was like, what? Why are we here? I don't like this cold. It was just strange. And then there was white people everywhere. At that point I'd never seen a white person before as well. So it was interesting. But I was excited. For me, I was fascinated by everything, by the people, by the culture, by the food, by the cold. It was, yeah, incredibly fascinating. Yeah, but it was a strange age to really move, though, I felt. But I really realized more than anything, though, that it was my parents that really, they sacrificed so much, because we came here, and yeah, life was very different. I went to school here, and I had a strong Nigerian accent, so everyone was like, why does this guy sound different? I was the African kid, and people didn't really like that. I suppose I was very different from everybody else, and it was incredibly obvious. So for me, I felt self-conscious about that. I felt I wasn't really proud of my identity, in a sense. It was a strange time, because in Nigeria, I was this proud Nigerian man, but then I came here, and then people, I was quite different, and my otherness was highlighted, because everybody there was white or black British. I was black like them, but I was different, So that really sort of affected me deeply, I would say, because I realized that the culture that I embraced, which was this Nigerian culture, wasn't accepted by these people. And because I was 12 years old, it made me feel like my culture wasn't important. And it's a shame that I felt that way, but I just wasn't happy to be a Nigerian man. So I remember I tried to be different, which was, I think, sad, really, to be honest. But yeah, I just wanted to be somebody else. I wanted to be a different person. And yeah, so I think this carried on until I was about 18 years old. So from 12 to 18, I was sort of in this transitional period where I was Nigerian, but I was trying to be British, And then I was British, but then people didn't but I wasn't British enough. You know, people didn't see me as British. They saw me as still Nigerian, even though I sounded like them. So I realized I went through all this effort to change my accent, but then I was still not accepted. So I was like, what do I have to do? You know, do I have to change my skin tone? Do I have to, you know? So it was just a very strange time for me. But yeah, but but also during that time I discovered film. So I think film, I wouldn't say film saved me, but film was an escape for me. You know, I would watch films and it would transport me to new worlds and new places, and it was incredibly wonderful. And you know, I realized that I could escape my reality and just basically, you know, live in this whole new world, and it was just wonderful. You know, yeah. So I mean, because I discovered film when I was 14. So, you know, I came to England when I was 12. So from 14 to 18, I just watched loads of films. You know, I knew quite early on that film was going to be a very important part of my life. So yeah, so, you know, once I realized that, my focus changed. You know, film took over everything, I think. And yeah, and, you know, I remember I would watch films to change my accent as well. I would watch American films. You know, this is why everyone probably thinks I'm American, because I just watch loads of films. I watch loads of American films, I think. Not to change my accent, just to sort of sound like them a little bit, you know, because they were just so cool and interesting. And so yeah, so 14 to 18, yeah, I just watched films, trying to be this British kid, you know, didn't really work out. And yeah, but I think knowing what I wanted to do quite early on shaped my life. You know, it influenced everything. This is probably why my films now explore identity, because identity has been a very important part of my life. It's because it's something that I've really struggled with, in a sense, you know, this whole Nigerian British dichotomy, you know, like, am I Nigerian, am I British, you know, or am I both? But then what does that mean, you know? So my films explore that, you know, explores the sort of the conflict between both cultures and how they intersect, you know, how they sort of tie into each other, in a sense. So yeah, that was, yeah. But you know, it was I'm really thankful that my parents were really there to really kind of, you know, because, you know, they worked so hard, you know, they sacrificed so much, you know. We came to this country. My mom was a nurse, you know, doing night shifts, working so hard for me. You know, my dad worked so hard as well. Seeing them work hard shaped my life. You know, I couldn't be average. I couldn't not excel at anything I did. You know, in school I excelled. You know, I think. Yeah, I did excel. I think, actually. Yeah, I excelled, and yeah. So you know, they instilled this hard work in me. They made me realize that you have to work hard for everything in life. You can't coast through life. You know, hard work is important, and you can never you can never achieve anything by just lazing around. This is why I make so much films, because I can't be idle. I can't not do well. You know, I have to do well, because they've done well. You know, they left a country that they were born into, that they've lived for 30, 40 years, and they came to England, a whole new culture for them. And for me, seeing that as a young guy, I was like, this is incredible. They sacrificed everything. So I didn't sacrifice anything, because I came when I was 12. So I could easily adapt into this country. But for them, they were in their 40s, you know, or late 30s, you know, early 40s, and they sacrificed a lot, you know. And you know, they probably think that I didn't see this, but I saw all of it. I saw how much they gave, and how much they suffered for us. So. Yeah, they inspire me greatly, and I think their love and their passion for me and my siblings has really shaped me. It shaped the man I am, and I make films because I want to make them proud of me. You know, I want to justify them bringing me to this country, because I would not be a filmmaker if they didn't bring me here. I would probably be an engineer or a banker or a lawyer. You know, I know I dress like one, of course, but I wouldn't be a filmmaker if they didn't bring me here. So for that, I'm eternally grateful to them, because it's, yeah, you know, coming here opened my world. So it opened my eyes to a whole new way of living, you know, to a whole new sort of influence, which is, you know, art and film. So I owe my parents everything. So I think really everything I do is for them. You know, of course I make films to convey my own views about the world and to tell personal stories. But I make films for them because I want them to see it and say, you know what, yeah, you know, he's doing well with his, you know, he's doing well with his life, and we're proud of him. That's really all I want. So, how did I get into directing? Well, it's a deep question, man. Well, I think I've always made films. You know, I think I made my first film, my first proper film, when I was about 18 years old. So, so it's been like a 10-year journey, actually. So, but I don't know, I've just, you know, I've always loved films. You know, I sort of grew up watching films, and I really wanted to sort of create my own worlds, in a sense. And I think that the first instant where I realized I wanted to make films was when I saw this film when I was about 14 years old. It was a film by Woody Allen called Annie Hall. I saw that film, and I was about 14 then, and I was just so mesmerized by it. It was such a powerful film, and you know, it was set in New York. It was a really passionate love story, and it was about this Jewish guy, you know, and I was this Nigerian kid, you know, I had never seen anything like that before, so it just captivated me, you know, ultimately. I just thought, okay, you know, this man has created this world that is so subjective to him, you know. So yeah, so I think seeing that film was the sort of the start of that journey, because I saw that film, and then I remember it was shown in BBC One at 9 p.m. And I just watched it. You know, I was just so mesmerized by it. It was funny, it was very emotional, very sad as well. I thought, you know, I want to do that. You know, I want to create these kinds of emotions. You know, I want to make films that make you feel something. So that was the first instant where I realized what a director did, and you know, I realized a director sort of crafted a world that was very personal to him. Yeah, so I was 14 when I saw that, and I think, you know, and then I just watched all these films, you know, and then I just watched films. I just watched so many films. I watched, you know, French films, I watched Spanish films, I watched African films. I really wanted to understand the language of filmmaking, you know. Yeah, and then I think when I was 18, I made my first proper film. You know, I shot it in my house. My siblings were the crew. You know, and it was just me. I wrote it, directed it. I was in it as well. I did everything on it basically, and it wasn't very good. It was very terrible. But making that film in my house that day, I think I realized that I really loved this. I loved telling stories, you know. It was a crappy film, but I loved it, you know. So then after that, I went to university, and I made films there as well, you know. My course there, it was a theory course, so I really learned about just the history of just, you know, films, and I watched loads of films, and I made about 5 shorts there as well. During my time in school, yeah, and then after that, I became obsessed with it. You know, I just became incredibly obsessed with just the idea of just telling stories and crafting worlds that meant so much to me, and just, yeah, making personal films. And you know, after university, I sort of spent 5 years just making films. You know, I knew I wanted to make films. So I just thought, yeah, just get my friends together and just make loads of films. So we made, in 5 years, we made about 6 short films. You know, some were good, some were bad. Actually, most were bad. Actually, to be honest, yeah, most were quite bad. But it was just great. You know, I was having fun. You know, this was from 21 to 26. So yeah, I made so much films then. But then I'd always wanted to go to film school. You know, I really, you know, all the greats that inspired me, you know, Spike Lee, yeah, you know, they went to film school. So I thought, okay, I realized then that I had to go to film school, but I wanted to actually go to NYU, but then I saw the prices, and I realized it was incredibly expensive, you know, so much money. But then I found a film school in London called Met Film School. So I realized that I needed money. So I basically saved up money for 5 years. I just basically worked a lot and just saved money. You know, I saved about £14,000. Yeah, altogether. Yeah, I just, you know, I knew that I didn't want to take out a loan. I wanted to just use my own money. So yeah, I basically spent that time sort of working, making films, and then once I had the money, I applied, basically. Yeah, and film school was really wonderful. Film school really, I think, changed my life. You know, it sounds exaggerated. It sounds very sort of a bit too much, but it's really made me realize what type of an artist I was. You know, I realized what type of films I wanted to make. Because I think before film school, I was making loads of films, but there were films that didn't really have a clear sort of goal. You know, there were more sort of experiments. I was just making different type of films. I didn't really know what type of films I actually wanted to make. You know, I made, you know, dramas. I made, you know, experimental films. I made comedies. I made, you know, really weird stuff, to be honest. But I think at film school, it was just a very intensive one year experience where I just got to direct so many films. But I was directing films where I knew what I wanted to say with it. You know, I was being taught by great people that really understood the craft of filmmaking. You know, so it was really wonderful. I just, you know, I think I left there really sort of understanding, you know, what I wanted to make, why I wanted to make it, and how to make it. Whereas before film school, I was making films that just, I didn't really know how I actually wanted to do it. I was just sort of like just having fun, you know. But during film school, I was having fun, but I was making good films, you know. And I think that was the big change, because I was making films that I think conveyed who I was as a person. You know, I think during film school, I realized I wanted to tell deeply personal films. I wanted to tell films about my culture, about my roots as a Nigerian man. Whereas before film school, I didn't, you know, there was no clear sort of focus in a sense. So yeah, you know, I went to film school, made 2 films there, you know, they've done quite well, you know, and yeah, but I think I just left there sort of very confident in my ability as an artist, I think. And I was, but I knew that this was what I was going to do with my life. I think from university, I knew I wanted to make films, but I didn't really see this as a long-term goal. I was just making films for fun. There was no sort of like vision, in a sense. You know, there was no clear sort of incentive to really make this like a long-term thing. Whereas at film school, I realized, you know, I'm actually not bad, you know, and plus my films did well. So I thought, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. You know, I was going to make films, and I realized at film school what a director did. I think I always thought directing was something that you sort of winged. You sort of, yeah, you know, I always knew how to direct, but I didn't really understand the language of it. I didn't understand how to, you know, work with actors, how to write scripts, how to, just the craft of it. I think film school really taught me the craft of it. It made me realize that, you know, there are certain things you have to know. There are certain things that you have to understand before you actually direct a film. And it made me a better artist, you know. And so yeah, so I credit that experience for really changing my life, because I left there knowing what a director was, and knowing that I was that. I could make films that conveyed my own personal views about the world, films that meant so much to me. And yeah, so it's been a 10-year journey, but I'm glad that it happened that way, because for me, you know, I grew as a person. You know, I think making films, you need really life experience, you know, and I think those 10 years, I really got that, to be honest. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but you know, yeah, I'm finally doing it, I suppose. So yeah. Do I feel disconnected from my Nigerian culture? It's a very good question, actually. I think I was disconnected, but now, no. I think from ages 12 to about 21, I was, absolutely. Because I tried to get away from that. I did everything physically, emotionally, psychologically possible to be not Nigerian, to basically, I really embraced a whole new culture, which was the British way of life. And I was so sort of lost in my own head that I didn't realize the beauty of my culture. But because I grew up in this country where my culture wasn't celebrated, I tried to fight that. You know, I wasn't proud of my culture. Really despised it, and because it wasn't accepted. You know, it was seen as horrible and as negative. So from ages 12 to 21, yeah, I would say that I wasn't Nigerian. I was a Nigerian guy trying to be a British guy. But from ages, because I'm 28 now, from ages 21 to 28, I would say that I rediscovered my love for my culture. So how did I go about trying to be British? I just think the first thing was my accent. I would say I think I tried to change my accent. You know, I think I had this strong Nigerian accent, and because everybody just kept saying, you know, why do you sound so African? You know, so I did. You know, I would watch films. I would watch British films. I would literally watch the news and just basically try and imitate them. You know, I really wanted to be, I really wanted to embrace a whole new culture, I would say. You know, so that was probably my first attempt at that, in a sense, trying to be British. I just try to be like everybody else, you know. I think it was partly peer pressure as well, to be honest, because I just felt that if I was British, everyone would accept me. It's a very sad sort of, it's a very sad thing, really, because I should have been confident in my own skin, to be honest. But I think back then, I just, you know, my Africanness was just not celebrated, to be honest. And I just felt if I was British, I would be accepted. But I became British, I would say, and I wasn't accepted. So I just felt I wasted time trying to be British. I watched news, I watched films, and this has nothing to do with how I dress. I think I've always, my style has been really separate, I would say. But I would say that I try to be British by, yes, just my accent and just my whole attitude, I would say. You know, plus I think I didn't really do anything that sort of celebrated my Nigerian culture. You know, I didn't really, I just wasn't proud of my roots. You know, I just wasn't proud of who I was, and but I think, you know, realizing my self-worth, I realized that I had to embrace who I was, and, you know, I was a Nigerian man. I think that film made me discover that, I would say, because I would say, from ages 12 to 21, you know, I did everything possible to be British. And then when I was 21 and I realized I wanted to make films, I realized what type of films I wanted to make. I was like, and then when I realized that I wasn't accepted by the British people, I was like, this is useless, because it doesn't really matter how much I change my accent. It doesn't really matter how I dress. They will never really accept me because I'm a Nigerian man. Even my name, Tomisin Adepeju, like my name is Nigerian. It's a strong Nigerian name, and I had this sort of insight. There was like a wake-up call. I realized that I was sort of trying to be somebody else, you know, and I realized in order to really be confident in my voice as an artist, I had to embrace who I was. And I realized who I was a Nigerian man. I was a Nigerian man, but I was a proud Nigerian man, you know, and I realized the beauty of my culture. I realized the beauty of my roots. And I realized that for years I'd neglected that to be British. And once I realized that, my life changed. You know, I became so much more happier. I could dress like this. You know, I realized I didn't want to please anybody. That's probably the biggest turning point in my life. Was I realized that you shouldn't please people. So for years I was trying to please people. I was trying to please the British people because I wanted to be like them. You know, I was like, accept me, you know, take me as one of your own. First ever festival I've played at. Oh, I would say, actually, I know where it was. Yes, so I think, how old was I? I was about 17 years old. And I remember I made this film called The One and Lonely. Um, and yeah, so I made that film, and um, I put everything into this film. I was in it, I directed it, I wrote it, I edited it, I did the music for it. I basically did everything on it. And this film I think it's my first short film where I think I was happy with the actual film itself, because I'd made films before that were absolutely atrocious, so bad. But The One and Lonely, I would say, yes, that's the first film I made that yeah, it was just really personal to me, and yeah, I really liked it ultimately. So, and yeah, I applied to this festival in Stockport. I'd never been there before. And I remember I'd applied to it, I got in, and the elation that consumed me was incredible. It was my first ever festival, so I was just like, I was emotional. I was like just crying, and I was like, it got in, and it was overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. And so yeah, then I actually thought, okay, I have to go there. I want to see this film with an audience, because yeah, I just thought like I'd spent all this time making the film. I had to see it with people, So I got on a train. It was very expensive. I remember I used pretty much all my money for that month, I think, and it was just me as well. It was just me. My actors weren't free. I got on the train. There was this quiet excitement inside me. I was buzzing. I was excited. I was nervous. I was sort of terrified, and I just wanted them to like the film. So I got there. It's a really quiet town. I was like probably the only black guy there, probably. And yeah, I was just buzzing, and then I went in there, the film started and it came on. It was a 3-minute film, really short film. And yeah, I was watching it, and because I was in it, it was even weirder because I was in the film, and just seeing my work on the big screen was just liberating. It was so beautiful and so emotional, because I realized, like, I was like, I made this work that people, because it was a comedy as well. So people were laughing at the jokes, and they really got it, They clapped at the end as well, and yeah, I think that experience was probably the first time I realized, wow, this is the power of film. The fact that I didn't know these people, I traveled there for 3 hours. It was only me, so I didn't really talk to anybody. I was just really shy. I sat down there in this dark space, this big screen, watching my film, and I realized this is what I want to do with my life. This is it. This is what it feels like, watching a film with an audience. I've always been nervous. I've always been excited about watching my film, but that experience and that place, that very first time watching my film, it's something that I think has influenced my whole life, because it's made me realize this is why I make films, to be in a dark room with people I don't know and just watch the film, and yeah, and it's really been the sort of turning point for me, I would say. I think if you've seen my films, or if you've seen my work, there's a sort of trend that's really sort of consistent throughout. What's interesting is before film school, I made loads of different type of films. I made French New Wave films. I made, rom-coms, comedies, dramas, action films. Yeah, I just made loads of stuff, basically, and they didn't really have a voice or vision. Those films I made definitely sort of taught me the craft of directing, but I think they didn't really convey who I was as a person. But going to film school was really the turning point, I would say, because it was at film school that I realized the type of films I wanted to make. It was just crazy how it all came together in this 1 year. I went to film school in 2014. Yeah, I was 26 years old. No, sorry, I was 25 years old. 25 years old, and that 1 year was just incredible. Yeah, it was just really wonderful because I just met some great people there, and made some wonderful films, and I think learning from directors who'd done it before was just wonderful because they really made me realize the craft of directing, you know, how to write scripts, how to talk to actors, but also really understanding what you want to say. And I think going to film school, I really understood that. And yeah, it was a really sort of brilliant experience for me. And I think for me, I just made films that I cared about. I realized I wanted to make personal films. You know, I wanted to make films that conveyed who I was as a person, you know. I wanted to make films about my culture and roots. Yeah, so that's really what I did there, you know, and that one year I made those films, and yeah, and I think for me, knowing what you want to say is the most important thing. How much do I love film? It's a very interesting question, because I think it's hard to really sort of describe how much I love film, because film is everything to me. You know, film is a form of expression. Film is a form of liberation for me. Film sort of encapsulates so much, you know. It's about life, it's about love. Film is just, I think for me, one of the most fascinating mediums, really, that I think has been created. So film means a lot to me. Only because I think I discovered film at an age where I think I was incredibly curious as a young man. You know, I think I was 14 years old when I really discovered film. And, you know, I mean, at that age, I was fascinated with everything. You know, I wanted to really understand what this medium was. You know, I really wanted to understand why films had a certain effect on you. So at that age, I think discovering film, and I think from that age then to where I am now, you know, that's 15 years. Film has just taken over my life. You know, film is such a beautiful language, because film is a language. You know, film is a language because you are conveying certain themes, you're conveying issues through this language. And I think it's a language that can change opinions, it's a language that can change attitudes, it's a language that can influence, that can make you cry, can make you laugh, can make you angry, can make you sad, you know, and yeah. So film for me is, I think, artistic liberation. You know, I know that sounds very deep, but it's pretty much that, you know. So, because it's all I have to express myself. And I think for me, I always say that I am lucky to be a filmmaker. I am lucky because there are people that have certain feelings and views and attitudes that they want to express, but they don't have an outlet for that. But I've got film. Film for me is a way of expressing who I am as a person. You know, who I am as a 28-year-old Nigerian British man, you know. So there aren't enough metaphors or enough sort of adverbs or whatever kind of phrase to describe how much film means to me, because film means everything. I mean, I'm a filmmaker and film consumes my life. So, and I think I've said this before, is, you know, film has to consume you. You know, you can't just like film, you have to love film. To really make films, film has to take over everything, because it's so hard, it's so difficult. It's hard making films. It's painful, it's emotional, it's challenging, it's exciting, it's depressing, you know. Yeah, it's not easy, you know, and so you have to really love it, because you question why you're doing it sometimes. So if you don't truly love it, you will never really be good at it, I think. In order to be a great artist, you really have to give it everything. You know, you have to sacrifice a lot. You have to give your heart and soul to film. You know, I know it sounds, you know, exaggerated, and it sounds intense, and sounds, you know, like I'm just sort of, you know, making this like this big thing, but I think that's what it takes. That's what it takes to really be to really do this properly and to do this well. You really have to give it everything. You know, you can't give it 40%. You have to give it 110%. You know, every day I think about film. I wake up, I think about film. You know, I always want to try and watch one film every day. You know, and films that you know, if it's a French film, a Spanish film, an Italian film, an African film, I want to always be watching films. I'm always thinking about stories every day. You know, how to tell them, how to write them, how to express myself. So, yeah, it's not a part-time job. You know, it's a full-time job, and I think people don't perhaps realize that. You know, all the greats, you know, Barry Jenkins, Spike Lee, you know, I mean, Kurosawa, you know, Ozu, you know, Tarantino, Hitchcock, you know, all the greats that inspire me, they were obsessed with it. You know, they were obsessed with film. You know, film took over their lives, and, you know, and they made some great works, you know. So yeah, so film for me is artistic expression. It is a platform and a medium to express myself. And, you know, if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, if you're a banker, you don't have a medium to express yourself. You can talk about your views, but with film, I can make work that hopefully will travel, that people can see and understand a bit of myself. So yeah, so film means everything to me. What's next for me? Well, I'm on post-production on my new short called Appreciation. Also, I've just finished a film called Oil. Oil is going to be, Oil is done. Oil is going to be hopefully out next year. That's been sent to festivals as well. Yeah, and currently though, shorts are really wonderful because, you know, it's a platform to really sort of grow and experiment. But I think my next project hopefully will be my first feature film, which I'm currently writing right now. So yeah, so I want to hopefully do that next summer because I think I'm ready for it. You know, there comes a time where you have to make that leap. You know, and I think that time is now. You know, I've gotta just jump ship and just, you know, jump from shorts to feature films. And I think, yeah, because otherwise I could keep making shorts for years. You know, because they're easier to make, they're shorter, less money, less time. But, you know, I think I'm ready for that leap. So yeah, so my next project is going to be my feature film, which I'm hopefully going to be doing next year. So yeah, that's the plan. That's what's next.